Hello, I'm Rex Litter with Midday News. Police Commissioner David Manning has issued a stern warning to the kidnappers and their associates, asserting that they cannot escape justice. Police Commissioner David Manning vowed that the criminals involved in the Walagu kidnapping will be held accountable for their actions. Commissioner Manning made it clear that criminals and their associates will be pursued until justice is served. He stressed that this new emerging crime poses a significant threat to the national security and must be eradicated at any cost. The police has also identified individuals who have aided fugitives responsible for the abductions in Bosavi. They will face arrest and charges. Commissioner Manning also affirmed that the victims of the recent kidnapping have been rescued and are receiving medical attention, counseling, and necessary help to recover from their traumatic experience. In Papua New Guinea, the difference between the planned and unplanned squatter settlements is not as clear as many of the older planned settlements have spilled over the original boundaries. The National Research Institute issued paper number 44, titled "How Can Urban Housing Settlement Issues Be Effectively Addressed in Papua New Guinea?" focuses on settlements and evictions in Port Moresby, which have become more frequent over the last decade, affecting an increasing number of settlement dwellers than elsewhere in the country. According to the report, contemporary settlements are important to the city's economy, and resources for people and property must prevail in the enforcement of the evictions. Hence, PNG policy and planning for housing and settlements must be addressed.
Planned settlements are officially sanctioned self-help housing areas that are provided with infrastructure and basic services. Unplanned settlements have not been designated by authorities and in most cases are deemed illegal squatters without services. The National Research Institute issues paper number 44 titled "How Can Urban Housing and Settlement Issues Be Effectively Addressed in Papua New Guinea?" focuses on settlements and evictions in Port Moresby, which have become more frequent over the last decade, affecting increasing numbers of settlement dwellers than elsewhere in the country. In the research, a brief outline of the factors that drive increasing squatter settlements explains why settlements in PNG continue to grow exponentially. The research highlights the diverging views of settlement dwellers and the challenges of addressing settlement concerns through a comprehensive urbanization and human settlements policy. Current policy and public perception of approaches to addressing housing and related concerns continue to mirror the influence of the colonial legacy of housing. These underlying biases have shaped the development of Port Moresby as a city marked by social and spatial inequalities. Research authors, NRI Senior Research Fellow and Program Leader for Society and Cultural Research Program, Dr. Elizabeth Koppel, and Busa Wenogo, state that contemporary settlements are important to the city's economy and respect for people and property must prevail in the enforcement of evictions. Hence, PNG's policy and planning for housing and settlements must be addressed from a wider perspective of improving living standards and the welfare of the entire country for all urban dwellers and rural people. Several recommendations are given, one being the government must acknowledge that most of our people are priced out of the housing market with extreme spatial and housing inequality, and improving rural human settlements with housing, electricity and water as part of the holistic approach to improving standards of living. According to the research, this extends to include improving governance and other areas of service delivery. Salome Vincent, TVWAN News.
Steamships Trading Company Limited and GFS Limited launched a new joint venture partnership and the establishment of Gulf Maritime Services Limited with signing of a Memorandum of Understanding. The signing of memorandum on Wednesday, June 14, paves way for GMS to provide maritime quayside and land logistics service to Papua LNG and more broadly to Gulf Province. The partners are committed to working with Gulf landowners to ensure opportunities for employment and economic advancement are captured in the project-impacted areas. GFS will own 44% and Gulf Provincial Government 2.5%, project-impacted landowners 6%, spread between PRL 15 landowners 2%, pipeline landowners 2% and riverine landowners 2%, with steamships holding the remaining 47.5%. The 8.5% equity made available to the Gulf Provincial Government and the PRL 15 impacted landowners will be free carried by the partners. The regional news. Victorian indigenous communities have elected their representative to sit down with the state government and negotiate a historic treaty. The First People Assembly is set to begin talks with the government on the state nationwide blanket treaty in the coming months.
Victoria is the first Australian jurisdiction to establish formal state-based negotiations for a treaty. Last month, around 7,000 members of Victoria's Indigenous community cast their votes to elect members to the First People's Assembly. It's the second such election. The stakes are high because this is the group that will be sitting down with the state government to negotiate a historic treaty. The ballots have been counted and this is what the Assembly looks like. There are 22 members who have just been elected. They represent Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people across 5 regions: Metro, Northwest, Southwest, Northeast and Southeast. In addition, there will be at least 10 seats reserved for formally recognized traditional owner groups such as the Wurundjeri, Gunditjmara and Tungarang nations. But there are calls for more of such seats. But for those who've just been elected, many are returning members from the previous Assembly. But there are some fresh faces hoping to make a real difference at this critical juncture.
Obviously, the most important thing is to do what we have been elected by our communities to do, which is to deliver on treaties so that our communities have true self-determination, and rather than coping in systems, institutions that don't work for them, setting up ones that actually do.
Exactly what might go into a statewide treaty is still unknown, but key themes did emerge before the Assembly election, and that is for Indigenous Victorians to have a greater voice when it comes to improving outcomes in health, education, employment, and to veto activity on culturally sensitive land.
It's good for our inner self actually to work on the problem, create the solutions and the activities, and then you can see the vision and you can make the vision happen. So that could be years, months, who knows.
The new look First People's Assembly will have its first meeting in late July, and if it all goes to plan, the first round of negotiations with the state government should get underway before the year's end.
Last week, the federal government released details of its previously announced Pacific Australia Labour Mobility Scheme reforms, which are part of the plan to significantly expand the program. A record number of Pacific workers are in Australia right now as the federal government expands initiatives. Another reform welcomed by workers aimed to greater transparency around workers' deductions. It will include a minimum net pay guarantee after tax and deduction of $200, plus changes to make sure workers understand the deductions, which are usually for accommodation, transport and paying up back flights. The Australia's opposition says South Australia households could be facing another hip pocket hit, with SA Water set to increase prices, but the government has promised that any increase will be below inflation.
As the bills stack up, Elise and Ben Sutcliffe are trying to push on.
When you go to spend that little bit extra you have to always also remember that you don't know what it's going to be like next month or the month after that.
The opposition says the Sutcliffes are like many middle-income families that missed out on cost of living relief in last week's state budget. And they've raised concerns about another hip pocket hit.
SA water bills into the future may be the straw that breaks the camel's back for many South Australian families, and we're calling on the South Australian government to ensure that those water bills aren't increased.
You try not to think about it too much, because then you're just going to be stressed and anxious all the time.
Because of the work that the state government has undertaken in this particular area, we are going to ensure that any changes in water prices are below the rate of inflation.
Meantime, the SA government has also announced it's making it easier for pet owners to find a place to live, as part of broader changes to ease pressure on renters.
We are seeing more and more people turn up with an animal distraught because they have had to give up their animal because of a rental situation.
It's not a fun decision, and I really wish no one ever has to be in the same situation I was.
The new laws will stop landlords from unreasonably refusing applications from tenants to keep pets. Renters, though, will need to comply with any reasonable conditions, such as having carpets cleaned or keeping their pet outside. The Greens say they proposed similar changes in Parliament earlier this week, which were blocked by the government.
People are tired of the delays. I think people are tired of the excessive consultation and the endless reviews. What they want is action.
The state government says consultation on the new rental laws will begin next week, and they're hoping they'll pass by the end of the year.
Back home, local business owners are tapping into the natural beauty of New Ireland province, enticing local and international tourists to create unforgettable memories there. The Velvet Cottage in Cavian Town and the Putput Treehouse Resort, Stephen Lavarabin outlined that business has picked up after COVID-19 shutdown in 2020. Local businesses, especially in the tourism and hospitality industry, have formed networks to help each other out. However, the environment would be conducive if their members of parliament can support the industry as well.
Last week the government opened a executive hotel for its open members and all this, and for us, the local operators, it's like a challenge to us that you want to retain, the provincial government want to retain the business.
In sports, corporate volleyball concluded its season proper before heading into knockouts in the fortnight's time. In Pool C and Pool D final point, matches were played on Sunday, June 18th. In Pool C, the matches of the day was between Kina Bank and City Pharmacy 1. The sets were evenly contested, with CPL setting in more points in the first set, but Kina Bank, fielding in two international players, couldn't let CPL slip by with a win. Replying with a good hit, registered the vital points to conclude the match with a 2-set 2-0 win. In another interesting matchup was between BPNG 2 and SMEC PNG in Pool A, an evenly contested game with SMEC PNG having the last laugh. The PNG Under-19 Garamut suffered their second defeat of the ICC East Asia Pacific Under-19 World Cup qualified tournament in Darwin on Sunday at the hands of New Zealand. The prior match, Garamuts were all out for 221 in 38.4 overs, defeating opponent Indonesia, who were all out for 148 in 45.2 overs. They came into this match after 2 consecutive wins, but fell short by 143 runs.
The Under-19 PNG Garamuts won the toss to bat first, hoping to make a third victory. However, the New Zealand put up a dominant display to hold them off and claim the win by 143 runs. In the match that seemed to be over before it began, James Frank Momo was the only standout in the team. The statistics of 4 overs, 10 runs, 3 wickets and 2.4 economy rate was the best for the team. James joined Tom Jones of New Zealand in the best performance batter in the match. This was the opposite of the previous matches where Garamut dominated Indonesia and Fiji. In the previous match, PNG innings was led by young Tom Downsey, who top scored with 63 runs and was supported by captain Trevor Griffin with 48 runs, James Frank Momo 39 runs, Gaba Frank 22 runs and Suvenia Son Tau 17 runs to contribute to PNG's total of 222. No one in the team reached that stat in their defeat to New Zealand. The fall of wickets from Garamut, Gaba Frank, Aluand, Robson Moge, Trevor Griffin and Downsey Tom recorded fall under 10 wickets, while Captain Nelson Pate, Igor Paco Moria and Anthony David recorded fall over 32 wickets. After losing their second defeat in the ICC World Cup qualifier, the team will be hoping to get the wins in their remaining 2 matches.
And that ends the midday news. More details on these stories at 6 p.m. tonight.